Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's dive into the fight that took place, Deontay Wilder against Chris Arreola. First, let me say, my pre-fight video is still up. It's going to remain up. Those videos are important, not so much for what I say, but for what you, the public, says in the comment section to the videos, right? That gives us a snapshot of where people are on the fighters before the fight takes place. Now, let me say this about Deontay Wilder. Many people were upset, critical of the pre-fight video. The feeling among many is that I'm not giving Wilder enough credit. That Wilder is an unbeaten heavyweight champion, Olympic medalist, right, who has a greater than 90% knockout ratio. That Wilder has beaten everyone except one guy by KO. And the one fight that went the distance with Wilder, right, was when Wilder got the heavyweight championship against Stiverne, and we knew Wilder won that fight before the scores were announced, right? I've had a lot of cracks where I've heard that I don't criticize Tyson Fury like I criticize Deontay Wilder. That Wilder is better than advertised. Now, let me say this. Right? I've run into many Wilder fans. Wilder, who calls himself the Bronze Bomber, right? Wilder calls his fans the Bomb Squad. At least he used to. And I need to have people understand what's happened right now in the heavyweight division. Right? There are a lot of fans of Deontay Wilder out there. Right? One of the reasons is Wilder's one of those guys who will be on network TV, a move a lot of people should do. But I need to have the public also understand that there's very little overlap. The folks who are in love with Anthony Joshua, they're Joshua fans. They're not Wilder fans. The folks who believe Joseph Parker is the future of the heavyweight division, right? They're Joseph Parker fans, right? They feel it's just a matter of time, right? Understand, folks like me, now I'm just here trying to profit off the whole thing, gambling. Folks like me don't believe that Wilder, Joshua, or Parker are close in ability to Tyson Fury. So, of course, I'm going to talk up Tyson Fury. I'm going to point out that Fury can do things the other guys can't do. Then, of course, you have other groups out there, right? Let's be clear, right? There are many people who feel that Vladimir Klitschko came in and just had an off night, right? That Vladimir Klitschko is going to walk through Tyson Fury. You also have a lot of people out there who can't understand why more is not being said about unbeaten heavyweight Luis Ortiz, right? Boxing is tribal, right? All of us have our own opinion. We're only proven right or wrong when the guys get in the ring and face each other. You should be troubled as a boxing fan that there's so many unbeaten fighters out there. It should tell you that these guys are not fighting each other. Now let's look at that pre-fight video, right? It spurred a lot of comments. The bet I recommended before the fight was to take Chris Arreola to win the fight. Folks, you were getting crazy odds. Right? One person who commented in response to that pre-fight video pointed out that he got 20-1 on Chris Arreola. Right? Some of you no doubt got 15-1 on Chris Arreola. Others got 12-1 on Chris Arreola. In other words, you were getting double-digit odds on Chris Arreola. Right? And the hedge I recommended was to take Deontay Wilder for the first 8 rounds of the fight. I further made the statement that if the fight went past the 8th round, I expected the title to change hands. Right? Now, as you can imagine, there were a lot of comments. Many people left messages in response to that pre-fight video that they expected Wilder to win this fight in 3 rounds, 4 rounds. Right, folks? The video's up, the comments are up. Revisit them. Now let me say this. Sometimes on a hedge, on any gambling play, you need every second of that hedge, right, in order to win. Well, believe it or not, the hedge I recommended delivered, right, at the last second. Because Chris Arreola did not answer the bell for round number 9, officially, as the gamblers here who made the play know, officially, Deontay Wilder, even I know this is undeserved, officially Deontay Wilder won the fight by KO at the 3-minute mark. Talk about last second. The 3-minute mark of the 8th round. Right? If you took my suggestion and you had Wilder in the 8th round by KO, that hedge held should have delivered at greater than 10-to-1 odds, and you needed it to wipe out the losses in the rest of the portfolio. That's why it's a hedge. Think in terms of a hedge fund. Right? The purpose of a hedge is so you can go after the big game. Right? The greater than 10-to-1 odds on the live underdog. Right? The guy who did not get knocked out in 3 rounds. Right? While also being protected. So when the champion, Deontay Wilder, gets the KO, you're able to live for another day. Right? You have no losses, or your losses are minimized. The hedge delivered. Now, what I'm going to do is tell you about the scene where I saw the fight. I like to hit bars to watch fights, especially when they're on free TV. Right? Gives me an opportunity to hear other people's opinion in real time as the fight is going forward. So, I'm in a bar and there are 2 millennials. 2 young guys who are watching the fight. One's the bartender, right? We're looking at the TV. The other is a waiter who's coming by and watching the fight, and then between rounds doing what he needs to do. The millennials had no doubt. None whatsoever. For them, it was all about Wilder. Right? I'm surprised these guys weren't wearing Bomb Squad t-shirts. Right? They couldn't understand. Could not understand how anyone could even consider giving Chris Arreola even a remote chance in the fight. Right? That was just ludicrous. All they wanted to talk about was the possibility of Wilder against Anthony Joshua. Right? Another young heavyweight with holes in his game, in my opinion. Right? For the record, I'm Generation X. Right? I'm not a millennial. So I'm listening to these young guys, and these young guys are going on. One guy actually mentioned Joseph Parker. Right? The mood with those 2 guys was that it was Deontay Wilder's world. Right? That Wilder was doing us a favor being on free TV. Hell, he was doing Chris Arreola a favor, fighting him. Who's Chris Arreola? He's yesterday's news. Next to me was a guy who was a baby boomer. Early baby boomer. Right? Now, I admit I haven't sat down and said to this guy, hey, what year were you born, or whatever, right? But let's just say I place him as a World War II baby, right? This is a guy who, in conversations, will start talking about Sonny Liston. We'll start talking about Ernie Terrell, right? Understand, the world for this guy, the height of the heavyweight division, is Muhammad Ali. So we start watching the fight. He looks at Wilder. Wilder comes out, flashes a jab. Right? The old timer next to me, very impressed with the jab. Right? Actually starts talking about Larry Holmes. Now, if you're a student of jabs, you know Larry Holmes is one of the high watermarks for jabbers. Right? Could have started talking about Carlos Monzon. There were other guys. Right? So Wilder's throwing a jab. The old timer was impressed with Wilder's jab. He was impressed with Wilder's size. Right? Well, let's talk about my opinion. I thought the fight was a car crash for Deontay Wilder. Right? Understand, even the millennials, as the fight went forward, couldn't understand why Wilder couldn't keep himself off of the ropes. Even they were surprised. Arreola comes out, decides he's going to give away the first round. Right? Arreola covers up. He's not even diving in like I thought he would. He covers up, he's outside, he's looking at Wilder. You know he's a vet. You know he's trying to gauge the angle on Wilder's right hand. Right? Let's talk about Wilder's skills. Wilder has a good jab. Understand, it's not the best jab in the heavyweight division. Right? I would make an argument, quite frankly, that Vladimir Klitschko knows how to work his jab when he wants to better than Deontay Wilder. Right? I would argue that Kubrat Pulev throws a better jab than Deontay Wilder. Right? Deontay Wilder, to me, has a good jab. It's above average. It's a good jab. At times, it's a stiff jab. Dare I say, Joseph Parker throws a better jab than Deontay Wilder. Right? Let's be cognizant of the different groups here. Right? There's the Wilder group, the Joshua group, the Joseph Parker group. Right? Those are the young lions. Even though Fury's not that old, Fury seems to be viewed in a different light than these guys. Well, Wilder, let's just say, he's not Larry Holmes with the jab. Understand, Larry Holmes wasn't throwing a left jab, trying to set up his A-plus punch, which is what Wilder's doing. Wilder's trying to set up that long right hand. It's A-plus. Right? No, Larry Holmes was bludgeoning you to death with a, sledgehammer jab. And the idea was, look, if you can't do anything with my jab, I don't have to do anything else. Right? Think Kubrat Pulev against Alexander Ustinov. Look at the film of that fight. I have it in my favorite folder here on YouTube. Right? Guys with great jabs who know they have the A-plus jab. They don't even have to humor you with other punches. Well, here Wilder comes out. You see the potential with Wilder, but I'm telling you, he's a young guy in his 30s. Right? Let's bring Einstein's theory of relativity into boxing. I'm just telling you that heavyweights age more slowly than everyone else in boxing. Right? Look at the heavyweight division. Right? Chris Arreola at 35 would be in trouble if he were a lightweight. At heavyweight, he's several years younger than Vladimir Klitschko. Right? He would be younger than Amir Mansour. Right? He'd be younger than Antonio Tarver. Folks, these guys are in the mix. He'd be younger than Alexander Ustinov, who I mentioned earlier. Right? I'm just telling you that guys in their 30s at heavyweight, David Price, they're still in the mix. Right? Other divisions happen in their mid to late 20s. Heavyweight happens in your mid to late 30s. when you look at Deontay Wilder, and by the way, a lot of that has to do with the fact that knockouts are so prevalent in the heavyweight division. So a lot of these guys, like Deontay Wilder, get a lot of knockouts early in their career. Right? The knockouts keep them from developing the skills needed for the later rounds. So then the guy, well into his career, just starts to learn how to box. Things that a welterweight has to learn earlier in his career. So Wilder, who has a KO percentage north of 90%, to me is just learning how to use his jab. He's just learning the rest of his game other than his long right hand. So, Chris Arreola spends the early part of the fight just gauging distance. Then he jumps in. This was Wilder's ability to keep Arreola off of his midsection. When Arreola gets inside, don't be fooled by Wilder's facial expressions and body language. Wilder has some play acting that he does, where, a guy gets inside, is ripping up his midcage, and Wilder's dancing, and Wilder is looking to the crowd like, oh, come on, this guy's not hurting me. What Wilder is not doing is finding a way to stop the guy. Right? Wilder's on the ropes. Sometimes the ref bailed him out. Right? Arreola got inside. Now Wilder drops him in the middle of the fight with, here's a shocker, a right hand. Right? He has an A+ right when he has space. At this stage in the game, where you're fighting legitimate heavyweight contenders, his opponents aren't going to give him that space. Right? So understand, in a fight that many of you thought would go 3 rounds or less, 4 rounds or less, don't believe me, believe your own comments in the comment section to that video. Wilder was literally in there struggling to keep his title. I know that's not how the fight's reported. At the end of the fight, who has the broken hand? Or thinks he has the broken hand? Who has the torn bicep? Who's going to require multiple surgeries? Multiple surgeries. Is this what the Wilder crowd expected going into the fight? Is this what the sports books expected when they gave you double-digit odds on Chris Arreola? Let me say this too. We've seen fights where guys have had closed eyes. Right? Eric Morales, Marcos Maidana. You remember that fight? There's a famous fight in boxing history. I forget the opponent. But it's Carmine Basilio, Boxing Hall of Famer. And at the end of the fight, Carmine has an eye closed, and a reporter says to him, "Did you have a problem seeing?" And Carmine says, "No, I had no problem because I have 2 eyes." Well, let me just say this. It's doubtful that Chris Arreola realized that he was fighting a guy who had a torn bicep and a broken hand late in the fight. At 35, I don't believe Arreola would have allowed that fight to end. I know the ref gave him 1 more round, and I understand that, his cornerman, Hector, was talking to the referee. Okay, fair enough. But just understand, you're 35 years old. You're never going to have a cleaner shot at the heavyweight title than you are against a guy who is green, who is one-handed, with 1/3 of the fight left. Right, folks? There were 4 rounds left in this fight. How many fighters in boxing today, no matter how banged up they are, right? Let's say one eye is closed, right? No matter how banged up they are, how many fighters would plead with the referee? No, you have to keep this going. Would the referee himself have wanted to stop the fight if he knew Wilder had a broken hand and a torn bicep? Right? So let me say this. With all due respect to the millennials I saw the fight with, and they themselves at the end of the fight were saying, yeah, wow, they were surprised at how rough the fight was. Right? When you see a fighter like this, who, number one, weighs less than 230, but yet is 6 feet 7 inches. Folks, he's slender. He's slender. Right? Could you imagine a hardcore body puncher, Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis, fighting a guy this slender? Where do you think they'd be? What kind of shots do you think they'd be throwing? Body shots, right? So you have to ask yourself, a guy this slender who can't keep Chris Arreola off of his body. I understand he looks cool. He has the MTV, social media, the Facebook part of his game down pat, right? He looks good, He has the facial expressions to look like, hey, these shots to the ribs, they aren't hurting me. I'm telling you, body punchers, I'm sure Anthony Joshua would get some foot speed to get inside against Deontay Wilder. Right? Wilder's going to have to find a way to protect his body, isn't he? Isn't he? Let me say this too. Good jab. A+ right hand. Let's add in a left hook. He has a pretty good left hook. Right? Most of those are thrown up top, aren't they? Right? You're telling me that heavyweights who know how to fight down low aren't dying to fight Deontay Wilder? Right? I mean, I'm just saying, folks, Chris Arreola himself is something like 6'4". A 6'4" guy was able to get underneath Deontay Wilder and get inside on him. 6'4". Right? Let's also hope that these casinos don't wake up, because the odds are preposterous on these fights, aren't they? I mean, the over-under on this fight, the one I saw right before the fight goes off, was 5.5 rounds. 5.5 rounds. Right? 5.5 rounds. In a recent Anthony Joshua fight, it was down in either the 3.5 or 4 range. Folks, I hope the casinos continue to confuse these guys with polished heavyweight champions. Right? These are young guys just now fighting the best oppositions of their lives. You saw Joseph Parker in against Carlos Takam. That fight went the distance. Folks, Chris Arreola, before this fight, had never been stopped in the first 5 rounds of a match. Never. Right? You think that Arreola, who's been in the ring with Vitaly, you think that Arreola didn't consider Deontay Wilder to be young and green? Right? Many of these bets are making themselves because these guys are that overrated. So, I know I've said some hard things here about the Bronze Bomber, You know, he's simply put one of the most exciting fighters to watch in boxing. I have a lot of respect for him. Right? But here online, if my audience are gamblers, and if we're here having a frank conversation on a guy's strengths and weaknesses and whether or not the sports book is overvaluing him, don't you think I should mention that this guy can't keep guys away from his body? Don't you think I should mention that this guy's best punch requires some room to throw it? That the guy, he has a pretty good uppercut, folks. But again, he's a young guy learning how to use his tools. Let's say he's not James DeGale. He doesn't have an uppercut and intuitively know how to leave himself space to throw it. Right? He's not keeping you on a shoulder so he can deliver an uppercut. Right? Now, this is a guy who was flat against the ropes in several rounds against Chris Arreola, who was a last-minute replacement for Alexander Povetkin. Right? And understand, too, when we talk about fighting low, right, what I want people to realize is Chris Arreola was able to get lower than Deontay Wilder because Wilder stands straight up, doesn't he? Well, what would happen if Wilder fights Amir Mansour? I know Mansour recently got his jaw broken, fair enough. But understand, Mansour hits hard and would come in lower than Chris Arreola. Right? There's some guys, understand too, there are people out there. I know staying outside is hazardous to anyone's health against Deontay Wilder. He's champ for a reason. He's unbeaten for a reason. That right hand is lethal. Chris Arreola tasted it and hit the canvas. Right? But understand from the outside, are you sure? Are you sure that Kubrat Pulev's jab wouldn't be able to land with regularity, taking Wilder out of his stance to throw that right hand? Right? So you have young guys, young by heavyweight standards. You can't judge them to the bantamweights and say, oh, this guy's in his 30s. No, this is the heavyweight division. Life begins at 30. Right? You have young guys out there who are literally learning on the job, who the casino right now is treating like a young Joe Frazier or a young Ali or a young Tyson. Folks, this generation is different. Right? I question Deontay Wilder's ability to keep guys away from his ribcage. Right? I question Anthony Joshua's ability to actually track down a guy in a fight. Right? They're talking about Anthony Joshua against Bermane Stiverne. How many slow-footed opponents is Anthony Joshua gonna fight? Then, of course, there's Joseph Parker. Parker's intriguing to me. Parker's intriguing because he's fought the toughest opponents of all of these guys. I thought Carlos Takam is a tough opponent. And Parker at times looks awfully good on film. Right? I think he has higher top-end hand speed than Anthony Joshua. I think he has a better jab than Deontay Wilder. But weren't you surprised in that Takam fight at just how bad he was defensively at times backing up? Right? You just got the feeling that if Takam just took his time, was a little bit more patient, and took an extra step, he would have landed flush on Parker's jaw. Right? So let's just say the heavyweight division has a lot of unproven commodities toward the top of the division. It's a flat-footed era. Everyone has big power. Everyone has big power. The question is whether they have the boxing skills to keep you off of them. Right? Everyone's a hunter. The question is how they do when a vet like a Chris Arreola decides to hunt them down. Right? In my opinion, Deontay Wilder didn't look that good this last weekend. Right? Certainly he was the more injured person at the end of the fight. Right? Some of the questions I had going into the fight, I still have. Right? Wasn't Arreola able to get inside? How many body punches did you see Deontay Wilder throw in this fight? Let me hear from you. Right? I understand there's a bomb squad out there. I read the critical comments to that first video. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video, not just for me, but really for all of us, so we can, on future Wilder fights, go back to earlier videos and look at the comments and see what the public mood was at the time. Thanks for indulging me by stopping by.